All right. So I will now give about 25-minute update what's happening here in Oulu, and then we will have a service break before the Q&A session. We are nicely ahead of schedule, and I'll try my best to keep this as short as possible so that we have ample time for the discussion with the speakers. All right. So this is my sort of traditional annual report, what has been happening, and I'm here representing many researchers working in many different projects. So I hope that you keep that in mind. I'm just the messenger here to a great extent. So what we have been trying to do here in Oulu for many years is that to furnish the city with different types of community infrastructure, building lots of software to make that infrastructure available for application developer service providers via open APIs, and then we ourselves, of course, we use that for research and development purposes. City of Oulu uses that infrastructure and software for public service, and then we have also the business side. And the underlying motivation is to really study human city interaction in authentic setting at downtown Oulu with real users, I mean the local citizens, the tourists, and whoever wanders about in the city center. So study the interaction between the city and them in authentic setting. And the popular term these days, even in paper titles, in the wild. And in this, and here's a little bit more detailed presentation what we are focusing on certain aspects. So in the infrastructure deployment, especially different types of public displays, different types of wireless networks, and then we also develop technologies on certain areas, and then these two things together provide new opportunities for application-led research, meaning that we create basically on top of the infrastructure and these technologies provide new services to people in the city center and also in control settings, sometimes even in the lab. And then when we do that, when we expose these new services to the general public, we then focus on the users on different topics there. And when we do that, then we get lots of valuable feedback on how certain technology work or how certain service concept works, and we learn about the requirements of that particular application domain. Okay, so we have had for 10 years this citywide Wi-Fi. So first I go through this, what's basically new in this infrastructure side, and then for each infrastructure I show a couple of cases what we have been doing the last year. Actually, this panel Wi-Fi network turns 10 years this fall. We are likely to have a nice little seminar in October to celebrate the fact that the network has survived 10 years. So what's new there? Well, the network, I mean, especially last year, became too popular for its own good. So the number of users using the network increased and still increases all the time. And we started, there's traffic exceeded the capacity of our main internet gateway. So we then collected some money especially from the City of Oulu's coffins, I mean, Chief Information Officer's budget, and also a little bit from the university, and we were able to upgrade the main internet gateway that really turned into a bottleneck during the busy hours. The number of access points is slowly but steadily increasing, soon hitting 1,500. And while doing that, so basically what we have been doing, upgrading the oldest 10-year-old access points to the new 8.11n that represents a great improvement in technology. And this graph here shows how the usage of the network has been increasing. So this graph shows the number of unique devices using the network in a given month. And this is only a subset of the network. So for technical and policy reasons, we don't get usage data from all 1,500 or 1,440 access points, unfortunately. But we are soon hitting 50,000 devices. And this graph here shows the proportions of the four most popular manufacturers of the devices, and nicely reflecting the global trends in the user device market. So you see this Intel plot going down, so basically the proportion of Intel-based laptops among the users has gone down big time and is going down. Nokia peaked And then even though we are here in the heart of Nokia land, Nokia is losing ground, and Apple and Samsung are the big winners. And please note the dips in the laptops in every July. So that July is the summer month here in Finland. So people put their laptops aside for a while. Okay, different device profiles, but let's skip that. And Operate emphasize this media capture, and that's really killing our network. I mean, so here we have a illustration of what kind of data is being transmitted in this Wi-Fi network. And on the left hand side, we have as the bandwidth hog streaming media. So even though the number of connections, relatively speaking, is very small for streaming media, but still it uses up by far the largest proportion of the bandwidth, and followed by web browsing. And these are there's a snapshot of the paper that we just submitted to Internet Measurement Conference a month ago. If we briefly look at the web browsing, so Facebook, surprise, leads both in terms of connections and traffic. Google is high up there. And then if you're wondering why we have F-Secure as the number 4, for example, my laptop is configured to check up on a very regular basis whether there's a new update to the F-Secure virus databases. Okay, YouTube, so we identified YouTube as the real bandwidth hog, and this graph here shows that lunch break is a popular time for people to really look YouTube. On the right-hand side, you see the daily graphs, and the dip on the right-hand side is Christmas. So even in Christmas, largely thanks to or due to schools being closed. So we will soon, or we actually observe that a huge proportion of this YouTube usage takes place in the different schools around Oulu, because every school is here furnished with this Wi-Fi network. Actually, yeah, so if I would expand this plot, we would see that there's a huge kind of heat. This is basically a heat map where the YouTube usage takes place at downtown. And if we would expand this to cover the whole network, we would see these hot spots or the heat spots around the schools. And for that reason, we have started studying whether we could actually satisfy these repeated YouTube requests for a particular YouTube video by placing cache kind of proxies within the network. So basically to reduce the load on the gateway, because I referred earlier to the detail of us upgrading the bandwidth of the main internet gateway. Of course, we would have wanted to upgrade it more, but the bandwidth at the gateway level is surprisingly expensive, certainly here in Finland or here in Oulu. So we wanted to go all the way up to 1 gigabyte, but that was too much for the CIO's budget, so we had to settle for 300. And here we have a plot showing basically the CDF of repeated requests for particular YouTube videos. It's very easy to observe that when a Gangnam style video comes over, how it spreads like a wildfire. There's kind of this flash crowd in the network, so huge number of requests for that particular video. And we observed that if we would place an infinite size cache or proxy inside this panel core, we would be able to satisfy 43% of all requests via this proxy. And this is at the user device level, showing that if we would place a cache for YouTube videos within the user device, meaning that the network would not be used at all, 20% of these repeated requests could be satisfied. And this is now what we are looking at in order to save the bandwidth or the capacity of the main internet gateway, which is now the bottleneck in the network. We also did an experimental comparison of the quality of service that you can get with this kind of municipal, really low-cost municipal Wi-Fi compared to the mobile. This is sort of outdated now because these measurements were conducted in November 2011, and since then the big operators have deployed 3.90 or LTE networks in this region. But for anyone working on Wi-Fi networks, what was the interesting observation, we also looked at the occupancy or the load on the ISM band, I mean 2.4 gigahertz band, and the mean duty cycles in every measurement point were less than 3.2%. The so-called busy hour was always below 50%, so meaning that Wi-Fi MAC does really a shitty job in utilizing the available bandwidth. Okay, then another type of network we have is this panel Bluetooth network, where basically we have these Bluetooth access points in different forms around the city. And the latest addition there is these portable enclosures you see in the upper right-hand corner. And here the Bluetooth access point is actually furnished with a screen, basically a touchscreen tablet, to provide basically different kind of services when you place your mobile phone on top of the box, and then you can select what you download to your device. And one interesting field trial we did with the Finnish Red Cross last year, so this was a national pilot for them, to see whether this kind of unsolicited Bluetooth proximity marketing would work in recruiting blood donors. So basically we configured 42 of these panel Bluetooth access points around the city to sniff around for visible Bluetooth, mobile devices that had Bluetooth on and visible, and if and when such a device, 34,000 in total, was discovered, the access point, or rather the control system behind the access points, would then tell the access point, okay, try push this marketing message to that phone. And during this 31-day trial, the access point tried to push 400,000 times, roughly in total. And only 500, roughly, of them were successful. Typically, the problem was that once the user actually got the notification, because in the current way how Bluetooth message delivery and the pairing of devices is implemented, the recipient has to first authorize the that, okay, I want to receive this message. And that typically takes place much later, because there's no alarm or notification to the user. So you have to notice that there's this message on your phone, in most phones. And when that happens, the owner of the device is typically beyond the reach of that particular Bluetooth access points. And of course, the transmission of the file or the ad cannot take place. But if it succeeded, so you would see the current real-time status of the National Blood Bank, and the really sad blood droplets basically tell that, okay, we need especially this type of blood. So the motivation for the Finnish Red Cross here was that they, especially during summer months, they are really struggling to get enough blood donors on a daily basis. They need about 1,000 in Finland, 1,000 donors every day to be able to supply enough blood to the hospitals around Finland. So this was their kind of trial to see whether it would work. So eventually we managed to transmit to 486 devices, and 15 owners then showed up to donate blood. So 3% of those who received the message. So it's very difficult to judge whether this was a failure. Of course, the staff at the local blood service station, they were really happy for every additional donor they got. And certainly it shows that the current way Bluetooth is implemented on mobile phones is not really ideal for this kind of a marketing. This is called carpet bombing marketing, so where you blindly send the same message to all devices that you find. Okay, then of course we have over the years done lots of work on public displays, and here we got some new infrastructure last year. So this multi-touch UP wall, it's just rather big, 3x2 grid, about almost 5 meters wide, 1.5 meters tall, kind of super green or power wall, whatever term you want to use, and then also a couple of these multi-touch tables. And using these displays, we have conducted various studies last year. Here's an example of Hannu Kukka's study. So basically, here we use these so-called lightweight UP hotspots on the university campus for the purpose of exploring what kind of visual signals would entice bypassing people to interact with the displays. And the details are provided in the Kai paper. Hannu is actually now working as a postdoc in Professor Annie Day's group in Carnegie Mellon. And another aspect we have been looking in detail last year is that the implications or the ramifications of having this kind of public displays that are really multi-purpose or multi-application displays, meaning that they provide a multitude of services. Currently these heavyweight UP hubs around the city, 18 in total, provide about 30 services, give or take a couple, because the services keep coming and going, depending on whoever is providing particular service. Not all services are provided by, some are provided by the University of Oulu's different service units and some by businesses. And one of the new services provided by the local energy company is this kind of waste tower game, very simple. So when you open the service, there's this pile of trash, sort of reflecting I think the initial starting height of this waste tower is the amount of waste produced by us Oulu citizens collectively in a daily basis. And then there's always a certain item of trash on top, and then you have to select whether it's going to be burned or recycled. And if you get it right, then you get a little kind of hint or kind of a thanks and then a related kind of tidbit of information. Or if you do it wrong, then you get no, and then a reasoning why it should be done the other way. And this has, so I just look at the statistics, so 44 games played on a daily basis around the city. Okay, then we conducted or looked actually the statistics, long-term statistics of how the placement of the service in the display affects its quantitative usage. So we have in the browsing portal here on the left, lower left hand quadrant, this kind of a quick launch menu where we always promote particular 4 services. And all services can then be browsed via this right-hand kind of a menu, or service selection menu. And we had so we looked at the long-term study. So on average, if we look at all services that we have had available during that particular time span, so if it's on the quick launch menu, it gets roughly 2 launches per day. And if it's on the hidden away in the service selection menu, it only gets 0.02 launches per day. And so this is easy to understand. When service is visible, we get lots of so-called curiosity use. People just try it out because they see it without having any intention actually necessarily using or particular need for that particular service. And related to this, we took one service, UP postcard. So this is a very simple service where using the overhead cameras in the displays, you can take a photo of yourself and the background, annotate it, select a nice frame or your preferred frame, and then send it to your friend. And by now, I would guess that 25,000-30,000 of these postcards have been sent in total. But we took this service and then provided 3 different service discovery mechanisms for this particular service on selected hotspots to see whether the discovery mechanism actually, what kind of impact it has to the usage of that particular service or this UP postcard service. And of course, it has great impact. And especially the more visible it is, meaning the easier it is to find, the more you get this kind of curiosity use that doesn't lead to anything. Because in this UP postcard, it's easy to say that if it leads to the submission of the postcard, that's kind of a serious use. And another experiment, so as a student project, we have a group of 5 students who created this new game, Wordster, and then we use this game as a probe to study how this kind of public display placed at some location, how it feeds into the social setting via either collaborative gaming, meaning people play together for a common goal, or we are competitive gaming where people play against each other. And in this competitive multiplayer situation, the game was played with mobile phone. So the mobile phone provided the player's private UI, and then the public display was always the public UI. And sure enough, we all know that this kind of displays really feed into the social setting, so people really gathered around the display, sometimes groups of 10 just to play the game, and when someone was selecting the word, so in this game you have to, from a grid of characters, find as many words within limited time as possible. So in the collaborative setting, single player setting, people really got together, the people behind gave advice, hints, and someone then was busy. But the multiplayer version, so even though in a controlled evaluation on university campus, people really said, oh, this is it. I mean, coupling the mobile phone with the game or with the hotspot using QR codes, it's easy, it works, and it's easy to play. Once we actually deployed this game on all hotspots around the city, so the single player version did still very well. It actually became the most popular service within a few weeks of all those 30 services. But then this multiplayer version where you were required to actually couple your mobile phone. So even though about 1,200 such games were started within our observation period of, was it 38 days, only 5 of them actually led to people scanning the QR code and playing. So even though in this controlled evaluation it worked really well, but once we deployed it for the general public who are not trained, not selected, they are just regular you and me, it proved to be too much of an obstacle, at least for them to really play the game. And this goes to show, I think it's a very important observation, that something that really works well in controlled setting, where you have your hand-picked, maybe trained test users, it is not necessarily at all representative what works with general public who use something on their own without any coaching and such. Okay, then we have one project of our team at the Department of Architecture, and they have done a couple of really interesting studies with the programmable lighting. So here's the first one, this is from last year, so light stories. Here the idea was that we have it on one street, we have these programmable LED lights, and we created a website where people could write or author their light stories that would be then told by these LED lamps. And there's a couple of nice papers on this if you're interested in the details. And more recent, this spring, Urban Echoes. And here the idea is that, or was that we had different types of lighting in the Otto Karhi Park. It's a fairly large park in our scale in the heart of the city. And depending on how people moved around in that space, what they did in the digital realm, for example, how these different wireless networks were used, so that all affected in real time the lighting setting in that park. So basically the lighting echoed whatever happened in the physical and digital urban realms. And still in emerging state, this latest infrastructure, this Oulu 3D Live, so this is a collaborative 3D virtual model of downtown Oulu. And actually this is all out in the open, so you are welcome to try it out at world.oulu3dlive.net. And we are currently in progress of expanding. It currently covers about 11 blocks, but at the end of July it should be up to 30-something blocks. And this is a very detailed model of the city, and we were lucky to get an internal grant from the University of Oulu to expand this work, and also to expand the functionality provided, and the interfaces provided by this model. And here's one example done at the Center for Internet Excellence, where Jonna comes from, service fusion, where the real-world online services are fused into this virtual model. Okay, one aspect is of course of creating this urban sensing. So all this infrastructure that we have in place, and also all other infrastructure like social media. So every time we use those, we create lots of traces of different types, and we have been studying this aspect for a few years now. So we have a really large-scale server that collects many different types of traces, and then we provide an API, or actually different APIs for using those traces in different applications. And one important contribution done recently and soon, defended by Denzel Ferreira, assuming he gets favorable statements from his pre-examiner. So this is Denzel's the PhD dissertation, where he has created this aware framework for Android platforms, for the Android platform, for collecting very rich sensor and contact information of that particular Android device. And it's publicly available on that website, and where you will find lots of more detailed information about the framework. So if you are doing this kind of stuff on Android, this might be very helpful for you. And one example of our work on urban sensing is this lake. So this is Professor Kostakos' work. So what we did was correlating location keywords in Google with our mobility traces and see what happened. And indeed, so this system is called Lake, and all the details are found in that paper, just a brief snapshot. What actually was found out that indeed this proposed Lake system is able to identify those Google search keywords that correlate with certain mobility traces at particular locations. And also that keywords produced by this Lake system are semantically relevant to those locations. And then on the user side and the more kind of anthropologic side of our research, so we have done lots of different studies on the city and the citizens. So different types of qualitative data have been collected via questionnaires, diaries, and interview studies. And one aspect we have looked at is that we have these two fairly large-scale long-term infrastructure, panel Wi-Fi and the UBI hotspots, and we have been studying their respective affordances regarding interactivity and also their domestication or appropriation. And then our anthropology team also conducted a very interesting study of our researchers' objective dreams and reflected those on the perceptions and of regular citizens. So looking at the power relations and also the mismatches between what we wanted to do and what people observed or perceived us to do. And then we also conducted a very interesting study of people's mental maps of downtown Oulu. It's yet to be reported in scientific forum, so we could use a number of people basically drawing out their mental maps of downtown Oulu, and now we are digging through that interesting data. Okay, we are still stuck with this infrastructure, so the funding condition of the ERDF funding that sponsored lots of this infrastructure require that we keep the infrastructure functional till March 2017. So it's a very brutal ERDF funding rule that you have to keep something. If you get money for infrastructure, you have to keep it alive for 5 years after the conclusion of the project. And for this purpose, we have been looking at ways to make money, because we don't have public funding for these operational expenses like internet access, etc., electricity. And we have been, for example, selling the capacity of the UBI hotspot for commercial use worth several €100,000. And of course, it's always introduced ramifications for the research use. Okay, reaching out. Okay, you guys, most of you are here for the summer school. And actually, I have to credit Albert now that Albert is here. So this was Albert's idea that we would have these summer schools. When we were designing the very first International UBI Challenge, I think that took place in 2009, so several years ago. And now it has turned into a tradition. I don't think we really wanted to be a tradition in the very beginning, but it is a great tradition to have, and we are happy to host these events. So yeah, this time we have 76 students and making it the biggest summer school so far. That's great. And then we have been running these Internet UB challenges, the first one back in 2010-2011, and second one 2013. And in the first one we had to set up that the finalists would be coming to Oulu to deploy their things, and that time we had 4 teams from Switzerland, Greece, Germany, Spain, spending their summer 2011 in Oulu, and it was a great experience for all of us. Lots of good stuff has come out from that time together since then. In the second challenge we had a different setup, so we didn't require teams to come here. We also provided them with the opportunity to deploy remotely, and we have our own challenge team here supporting them. And this time, I don't know, maybe it's our marketing, whatever. Of course, this time we didn't have, in the first challenge we were able to sponsor grants up to 10,000 euros. Due to lack of money, in the second we were only able to advertise 2,500 per finalist, and I don't know whether that explains it alone, but we only got 4 entries into the second challenge, of which 3 have been invited to final for deployment. That was a big disappointment for us. Whereas in the first one we had in double digits, of which then these 4 were invited to the final. And then we also, with our little spare money we have available, we support this UB Research in Residence program. So basically where you can come to Oulu and get a little support from us to conduct research on top of this infrastructure in our city lab. And here is a picture of 2 junior academics from Heine University Düsseldorf in Germany. They were here last year collecting really interesting data on the Bangalore Wi-Fi and UB hotspots for their own research project on ubiquitous cities. And now we are hosting a research from Madrid, Spain for 6 months, and then negotiating for a professor from Australia coming here in the fall. Okay, just to conclude, so as we all understand, conducting this kind of research in a city center is, of course, there are many facets, many challenges, dimensions to that. Lots of confounding variables in the wild. And of course, it's not pure research you are conducting. There's lots of deployment. You have to worry about the public service aspect, etc. And also the last but not least is the long-term resourcing. It's very challenging to keep this kind of thing going. We have taken real beating over the past year with our funding application. I think my record is 5 no-nos. So last 5 funding proposals have been rejected. All right. Well, thanks to our sponsors. So without their generous support, this wouldn't have been possible. And last but not least, if you are wondering about this logo up here, so Oulu was, for the second year in running, made the last 7 or top 7 in the Community of the Year competition, and I was in New York on last week witnessing how Oulu again failed to reach the top 1. So we were in top 3, but Tai Chung from Taiwan was selected this year as the Intelligent Community of the Year 2013. But it's been a great exercise, and what we have been doing here in the UB staff was played a very visible part in this competition. All right, thank you.